add more knowledge into the kind of. So basically, I'll be talking about participatory approach to in conflict early warning and response systems. But I will also want to establish what is conflict early warning and response. There's a lot of early warning and response systems, but I always like to make it specific in peace building that it is conflict early warning and response, because we need to be sure of what kind of early warning and response systems are we talking about. And it's because there are early warning response on flooding, for instance, which is currently one common example I see around. There are systems that are built around warning people from flood, disaster, and what have you, especially in here in Nigeria and some closer countries I see. But basically, conflict early warning and response systems, according to Brutus Gali, is a system that helps to assess the situation of a threat to peace and prepare actions based on information about natural disasters or political indicators. And then basically understanding early warning, I will stress on the fact that it relies on good forecasting of the probability and the severity of a potential conflict escalating into violence. For instance, there are times where I've worked in a situation room where we manage early warnings. There are threats, quite all right, that we have to analyze those threats. When people want to say there is a small issue between two tribes, particularly in a particular area, the first thing we do is to analyze the severity of, let's say they had an issue in the market square where they go to sell things. We need to analyze the extent of that disagreement, and also analyze and say, okay, this can lead to a full-blown conflict or violence, as the case may be. And then it's a kind of system that allows people to report conflict situations. But then it is over the years there have been issues of not just reporting. How does the conflict early warning and response systems become more participatory as possible? And then it is my opinion, I used to say that early warning without a good response, it's not good enough. So why there have to be an early warning to conflict situations, the response must be as good as the warning. This is because without a good response, the warning is affected, or the warning might not really be that vibrant because there is no corresponding response. If people keep reporting conflict issues in their community to say they notice some early warning signs that, or they normally during, for instance, there's this header farmer tensions here in Nigeria, and then there is a particular time that these things happen mostly, and then people warn that, okay, the rainy season is here. This is the time where there are clashes between herders and farmers. Herders are looking for transhumance routes, grazing, and what have you. Farmers have had their crops planted and waiting to harvest. If a community keeps reporting such issues to say, please, we need more security, surveillance, and what have you, to be on ground because of these issues, and then there is no corresponding response from the security actors and major stakeholders which we will be looking at much later, it is likely to affect how people respond, how people warn about conflict situation, because the response is not as much as the warning. So conflict early warning and response system. Yeah. So why participation matters in conflict early warning and response. So participation in early warning and response systems is important because of contextual relevance. I worked in the early warning and response systems where we had to go back to the drawing board, because some consultants were recruited to say, we want to do an early warning response system where in these communities that have had issues of violence and clashes, we want to have a system that warns, and then we have to have a corresponding response as well through the security agencies and what have you. But then the the system was not contextual enough, because as of the time an application was created, they did not even have, they did never had options of conflicts that was prevalent in those communities. So we had to go back to the drawing board to see how we could actually go back to the communities and say, your participation in this matters a lot. Your participation in this matters a lot. How do we integrate issues? What are the historical triggers of conflict? What are the historical triggers of conflict? Because we notice that they are very important in how early warning and response systems is managed. Because if, for instance, there are no issues of header farmer clashes, for instance, in that community, there's no history of header farmers clashes, like, for instance. And one of the things your early warning system is prioritizing is early warning, is header farmer clashes, for instance. You find out that they do not have really things to report around that. So you must really have a contextual knowledge of the history of conflict and clashes, so that it will allow even your response and analysis of those conflicts, it will infer your response as well. And then why also participation in conflict early warning and response systems matters is because of trust and legitimacy. There needs to be people who build conflict early warning and response system needs to have a kind of a synergy with communities. And that is why most early warning and response system have moved beyond just informing people about a system where you can report conflict. They now have more of community-based committees. They have a kind of an approach that is non-kinetic. Because before now, a lot of early warning systems had this approach where they came in with a kinetic approach of bringing, once there's a likelihood of a clash or conflict or violence, as the case may be, they just notify the security agencies and they come in mass. But now it has gone beyond that. There are non-kinetic approach, more of setting up committee. For instance, in a place where we worked, where I work, community ownership of early warning and response systems. When early warning and response systems are participatory enough. So I want us to be looking at how there are actors in conflict early warning and response systems that are important in what we do and how we could actually make them how it could actually be more participatory. So I was talking about local communities and civil society organizations coming together, because at the moment there are a lot of duplicated effort around conflict early warning and response. So even the security agencies that are supposed to be at the forefront of response, even the security forces that are supposed to be at the forefront of response are now even confused at the point, because there are a lot of efforts around conflict early warning and response. So if there is a way we can have a synergy among local communities, civil society organizations who have one integrated system of early warning and response, it will be very, very important to enhance more participation. And then, because early warning and response is not a stand on its own venture, there's always the need of both the federal, national, local, and even regional governments to be part of the whole early warning and response system. This is because for you to have the buy-in of security agencies to act upon conflict issues, you must have the government of the day to understand the kind of conflict early warning and response systems you want to do and see the importance and the need for it. Also, there are regional and international organizations such as the African Union, United Nations, and regional economic committees, ECOWAS, ICAD, and what have you, that are very important to conflict early warning and response system. Like I had said earlier on, the ECOWAS, through the West African Network for Peace Building, have a strong conflict early warning and response systems all around the West African states. And it is very, very, it is also connected to even the grassroots early warning committees, where communities come together, and the support that comes from it, because it's regional, makes it easy, because we have bordering states and what have you. So insecurity in another state that borders Ghana, that borders Togo and what have you, directly or indirectly affects the entire region. So there's need to see more of this collaboration, even at the West African level, even at the African Union level, rather, where we want to see that there's an integrated system of conflict early warning and response, even at the African level. It should not just be West Africa or just Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya or South Africa, or as the case may be. There should be more regional collaboration regarding conflict early warning and response system. Next slide. So here I spoke of, I'm going to be talking while I wrap up. I'm going to be talking about community peace building. Like, I want to talk about practical CWAS model I've seen and I've been part of. Sorry, my examples are a bit more of the Nigerian example, and maybe by a bit extension, West Africa. So there is this approach, the model of the community peace observers, which was an approach for conflict early warning, and a project in Nigeria called the Community Initiative for Peace by Mercy Corps and USAID. It trained community observers as local volunteers to monitor and report signs of tension in their community. So this CPO served as frontline detectors to early warning signals. So this is an approach of participation, because so most times we even the approach that it deployed was to see how even people who have been termed as being the mischievous people who always spew hate speeches and whatnot, we now transform them into the peace advocate, into those who report the conflict. And then because of the new responsibility that has been placed on them to always report issues, they stop doing what they are doing that probably could provoke conflicts and what have you, or clashes. They become more of peace advocates. So they are being trained on how to monitor. And because they are in the community and they know how these trends occur, they are always signals. And then there's also the multi-stakeholder peace platform, more of forums that bring together traditional leaders, civil society, youth groups, security personnel, and local authorities to discuss emerging trends and design conflict-led responses. So this is more of stakeholders drawn from all the facets of the society, because the traditional leaders are very important in any issues you want to do that pertains community development. They are very influential as well. They have to be part of a kind of a forum that we can set up. And because empirical evidence shows that the youth are drivers of violence, it is very important that they are also part of, conflict early warning and early response system. And of course, the civil society and local authorities, when they come together to discuss this kind of conflict early warning and early response threat, it yields more results, because these are people who are neck deep into what happens in communities, and they could actually help profile solutions to it. So I'll go to the challenges that is facing participatory conflict early. Yes. So I sum this from my experience working on early warning and early response in Nigeria, and by extension, I know it's likely what happens even beyond here. So most early warning and early response systems are having a lack of coordination. That is what I mean by lack of coordination. There are no parallel efforts by both the NGO, government, international donors, which is often fragmented and duplicated. Everybody wants to have his own glory. There's no, it is more of competitive than collaborative. Rather than people coming together to say, okay, let's do this. So you find out that even we from the civil society organization, because we have a project around conflict early warning and early response, we want to be seen as working too. We want to tick our boxes so that international donors will say, yes, we've done our work. But then most times we don't really work in tandem with the government and other community development personnel. So there has been a lot of lack of coordination in this. And then there's also a limited response mechanism. So while communities are able to detect risks, they often lack the resources or authority to act on them effectively. So you find out that there's a lot of warning, like I said earlier on. There's a lot of warning, but then the response is not corresponding. There's a limited response mechanism because most times communities detect risks, report the risks. There's a system that helps enable them to report easily, but there's no system that acts on these threats, security threats, before they escalate into full-blown conflicts. And also there is safety risks for monitors. That is, community members who report threats may face intimidation or violence in areas where with active conflict or weak rule of law. So this practically has happened where we had to relocate someone from a particular community. At the time, we did a project in a community where the community was in active conflict, so to say. The community was in active conflict as of then. We had to relocate the person because he reported a particular security threat or risk in the community. So they began to look for him. The bandits began to look for him because they felt that he was also a threat to their kind of business of causing havoc and whatnot. They began to look for him. So most times that is a challenge. So because there is no safety is not assured for people who report these early warning signs, you find out that there are communities that are scared of reporting conflict signs. There's also the issue of inadequate training and resources, where you find that community monitors lack the capacity to document, verify, and escalate reports accurately. So you find out that if there's no training in communities where we want corresponding conflict early warning and response, you find out that I found out that most times people report more of incidents than they report incidents than actually early warning signs. And most times it's as a result of inadequate training they receive. They do not understand what it means to detect an early warning, the conflict early warning. So they report incidents and say, oh, so person has been kidnapped, so person has been, so place was affected yesterday in an attack. So early warning is not about recording incidences. It is basically about preventing them. So we don't want to say, oh, so casualties happen. No, we want to say at the end of it, we want to say we're able to prevent conflicts because of so thing was reported in time. There's also the issue of technology gap. I think it's not more than 2 months ago. I was in a community where I went to follow up on a project. The project was done, I think, 2 years ago. So I was following up because I went there for a research, and then we're asking what happened. Why was conflict early warning and response low from the communities, even when they said they had a lot of issues around insecurity. They said most of them do not, because at the system of conflict early warning that was expecting them to report was more of a digital kind of a system and application. And these communities are a bit rural, and then they do not have that technical know-how of how to download an application and even report. So that project had other means of reporting conflict. Like you could just have there's a toll-free line where you could actually just call and reach out to, and then they reach out to the security personnel who are in charge of the response. But then that community did not have, they do not have broadband network. So you could not actually make a call until you drive out to a particular a location before you could actually put up a call. So you could see that this gap in being ICT compliant and whatnot excludes even some of this community, especially this community I'm talking about. It excluded them from reporting conflicts. Thank you. Oops. So I'll go to the last slide, and I'll just talk about it briefly because of time. So basically, how I think we could actually strengthen participatory conflict early warning and response systems is basically to build multi-source data gathering, which is linked, that we begin to link sources of information into one, more of like a synergy of all conflict early warning and response. Also, secondly, regional and cross-border cooperation, where I said this before now, where I said there should be bodies like that integrates the conflict early warning beyond just countries to states. And then leveraging on technology and innovation, the use of AI and machine learning for trends prediction. Yes, there's this emerging school of thought about how to use artificial intelligence to prevent conflict. There is this possibility, and we must also leverage on these new technologies in conflict early warning and response system. There should also be real-time monitoring. That is to say, real-time monitoring where once conflict is being reported, there is corresponding there's a warning that is being sent, there's corresponding response at the moment. So I think that is that, and I thank you very much for your time, and I apologize for my network.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dambo. I think that is very informative, and of course we thank God that we recovered and we got to hear the rest of the presentation well. Maybe I can just take this opportunity to request us to proceed. Yes, let us appreciate him with clapping emojis for that. Really practical, really concise. I'll welcome us to ask any questions, and we can just get into a session where we are really engaging and having conversations around this very important topic. Seeing what he's just highlighted, and before I even and give what I've picked from it. I think you can raise your hand, and I can see Dr. Sokfa, your mic is unmuted. You can speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Joy. Richard, thank you so much for the excellent presentation. Despite the network, we still got a lot from your presentation. And thank you for sharing all that experience of yours. So this was a very grounded presentation. I have some questions that I hope you can respond to. A number of questions. So I don't know how you want us to go, Joy. Maybe I can ask all my questions at once, and Richard can then respond.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm following.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question I have is on the extent of integration. So you, at the beginning, you gave us the vision. That the vision is to integrate early warning and response systems from community levels up to regional systems. What is the progress in that regard? What are some of the successes in that regard? And who is doing that integration? Then the second question is, can you give us a sense of the flow? So you've spoken about this in different ways. You've talked about the community actors who collect information and share with the systems, traditional rulers, leadership. But can you just give us a kind of a basic flow to say this is where it starts from the community actors? When they collect information, they send it to this person, or they put it here, and that person takes the following steps and whatnot, up to where it ends. I know you said the response is very poor, but at least to whatever level of response you get. So just to get a sense of the progression from signs to maybe action. We don't know. And then finally, you said there is a difference between
Thank you.
sign.
Thank you very.
You said there is a difference between signs and indicators. Can you help us understand the difference? So between signs and incidents, right? That people report.
Okay.
So can you help us understand?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Indicators and
Signs and incidents.
Okay, and okay. I get it.
Yeah.
So let me start from the last question now. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, so let me start from the last question, going then. And I proceed. So incidents are. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So incidents most times are things that already happened already, like as a result of conflict or as a result of violence. Two people were killed already, and then you go to an early warning system and you report that two people were killed. Early warning systems is not meant to record incidents, except if it has that component on the flip side. But the main aim of an early warning and response system is to avoid any incidents. So once it is a sign, once there is a threat, you highlight it so that it can be avoided. Steps can be taken to avoid an incident. So, but most times when you have an early warning platform, a lot of people tend to A lot of people tend to report incidents because they do not understand incidents and signals. But then also there's this understanding that incidents could also be signs or threats to further escalation. So if you are reporting an incident, you have to state why that incident could lead to another or could lead to a full-blown conflict or violence, as the case may be. I hope I'm able to answer that. And then the steps to reporting incidents. No, sorry. Steps to early conflict, early warning, and response systems. So most times, okay, I'm reading someone's. Okay, yeah. So most times in reporting conflict, it has to start from the person, like a community member, once an issue, a threat is identified. Most times there's a community dialogue. There's a community dialogue group where even at community level, they analyze that threat. Once they analyze that threat and they notice that, yes, that security threat is something that is also should be part of a warning so that they can be corresponding, they can be response as well. The community at that level, which is the community leaders, sometimes we have to add religious leaders because in places where there are religious twists into issues of conflict, you have to add them. A place where there are religious twists into issues of conflict, you have to add them. There are places where you have, and also I saw a question where I think in answering this, I should answer her. That is from Maropa, where she spoke about early warning is negatively impacted by community dynamics, e.g., misogyny, ageism, and classism. Yeah. So most times in setting up these committees, we have to look at some of these dynamics too. One of our success story in a community where we worked on early warning and response was the fact that for the first time, women were beginning to be part of a security meeting. So we had to also be big or emphasize more on inclusion to break some of those stereotypes that women cannot be part of it. Yeah, you have to understand that it's their tradition, but then with a bit of advocacy to say this is why a woman should be part of the early warning and response system. Because in this community where, for instance, you are predominantly farmers, most of you in the morning go to the farms and probably leave your wives at home. There are abnormalities that your wife will notice while you are away in the farm that you might not see it. So once you work in an African community, you are likely to find some of those things, some of those dynamics you are talking about, Maropa, like classism and whatnot, ageism, misogyny, and what have you. You are likely going to see some of those things, but then you have to be deliberate about inclusion. So answering the last question about, okay, so the extent of integration, there are that I am aware of. It's the one that is being led by West Africa Network for Peace Building here in West Africa, where there is a system where in all communities and all states in West Africa, they're trying to integrate the system. And one of the things they're trying to do is to see how, even beyond integration, to see how even existing conflict early warning and response, existing and even the ones that do not exist at the moment, because there are some that have been there, but because after they are a project circle and after the project, they just left it, to see how they can incorporate those systems into one body and have like networks of early warning and response in every nook and cranny of West Africa. And I know that there is one currently that I don't know if it's still at the ideation stage or it has kickstarted from African Union's Continental Early Warning System too. They have an AUI which is being supported by GIZ. They're trying to start one that is more of an African early warning and response systems. These things are not easy, and it takes deliberate efforts to get them done. But then it's also behoves on us because early warning is something that needs everyone, everybody, every facet of the society. So if we must get this done, everyone should be part and parcel of the whole.
Mr. Dambo, we lost your audio again, but it appears you are actually muted. Okay, as we wait for Mr. Dambo, I think he's had to log out and log in again. Maybe we can just have a conversation. And this is perhaps, I don't know if it will be skewed because it's in the context of Kenya. In his presentation, I noted he mentioned of how the empirical evidence collected shows that youth are drivers of violence. So when we look at the early warning platforms in these current times, I'd easily make a conclusion that they're mostly controlled by the youth. Okay, so I don't know in your context and the different countries represented in the room and those who engage with matters, conflict, early warning and response systems. Have you maybe engaged with any law or policy that addresses the regulation of these early warning platforms? Because in the context of Kenya, we've seen some of the platforms that serve that purpose end up being weaponized by the government to sort of control what goes out to the public. So maybe I could just hear from you all, anyone who's ready just to have that conversation. Yes, Gao, I see your hand is raised. Gao? You're still muted. Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Apologies for that, colleagues. In regard to your question, I'll bring an example. There was a study conducted by the Institute of Security Studies earlier this year, I believe. I did share it to the group, where we looked into how the youth aren't necessarily in control of the systems that perpetuate violence, but are the target market for it. So a lot of the rhetoric is centered to them because we are the biggest consumers of social media content. So particular influential figures, content creators will be paid to push certain agendas. And the study actually looked in how that played out in our national elections last year. So what they had seen was a rise in content creators and influencers actually making certain political views or siding with certain political parties and thus mobilizing their following to kind of lean into that direction. And then that kind of also played out in the results that we saw, where there was no definitive winner, and then we had to like transition into the government of national unity, where everyone kind of sort of has a stake because there is no overall majority like that. So as far as that is concerned, just to take it back to your point, it's not that the youth are in control, but rather they are the easiest to mobilize as they are the biggest consumers of social media content. So if you use that to kind of push certain narratives, they are most likely to be the ones that consume it and the ones who have the time to act on it. So I think with early warning systems, we do need to take those dynamics into consideration, hence my comment on things like misogyny and ageism, because we need to know who is the target market of the perpetuations and how we can counter that as well. And the umbrella of participatory responses to early warning systems.
Right, that is well answered. And you can share the resource to back that up. You mentioned the Institute of Security Studies. Maybe you can just share a link in the group so that whoever is interested in looking at their findings on this matter can also check it out. I don't know if there's anyone else with another question. Like Mr. Dambo hasn't joined us yet, but we are getting to the tail end of this session. So maybe before we just close the round, I can give you 10 seconds for anyone who has questions before I request Dr. Sokfa to just, give us the final remarks. Anybody with a question, comment? Right, so Dr. Sokfa, allow me to invite you to just close for us. We've been part of the conversation from the beginning, so you can just quickly close for us.
Okay, thank you so much, Joy. Thank you for moderating, and thanks to everyone who participated today. But also thank you very much, Richard. I don't know if you're still online for the presentation. There was a lot there to learn, and I feel like we still need to visit early warning systems again sometime. But yeah, keep following us. Keep looking forward to our sessions. We have a few more coming for this year, so we will keep you updated. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining, and I guess we will see you again next time.
Yes, thank you. Let's meet again on the first Thursday of the following month, that is September. Thank you so much, Miss Emma, Mr. Sampson, Miss Gao, Mr. David, and Dr. Sokfa for keeping with us from the beginning to the end. The conversation continues, and yes, we'll definitely have another bite of this topic. I think there's a lot to explore there, and just to put into practice, even in our peace building, spaces of influence. So have a lovely evening, day, depending on where you are. I've been your moderator, Ms. Joy Kiminja, hoping to see you again next time. Thank you, and goodbye. You're free to log out. Thank you, David.